I got 7 unconventional first home buyer tips for you today. I'm Andrew Malcolm here from mortgagehq, and I want to walk you through a couple of things that you should be thinking about if you're looking to buy your first property in the next little wee while, or you've already been looking and you're finding it hard to get something under contract or to win an auction. So the first thing I want you to think about is to target properties that are not desired by developers, especially in the major cities, especially if you're buying in Auckland. With the unitary changes, there's been a lot of developers, and there's certainly a lot more developers coming into the market that have deep pockets, and any property that has development potential either in the short term or in the future is going to attract more interest than just your normal mum and dad homeowner or first home buyers. So if you know what developers are looking for and you don't want to compete against them in the buying process, you really want to target properties that don't have development potential unless you can afford it. This takes me to point number 2 is developers are looking for land that's probably 600 meters or larger, or 1,000 square meters, where they can put multiple properties. So I know some friends of mine recently bought a property, and it's 540 meter square section with a nice house. I know that they're not competing against developers in their circumstance, and made the buying process a bit easier. Takes me to the next point is cross lease. A lot of first home buyers are thinking cross lease, that's not a good idea. Try and avoid it if you can. Now, by buying a cross lease property, you're definitely avoiding developers unless they own the other properties, because it creates a lot of uncertainty for them. So if you're looking at cross lease and you're willing to do that little bit of extra work that other people can't be bothered with, odds are it'll be easier, paradoxically, to buy a property at cross lease than not cross lease. And if you can work in with the other neighbor for the future and sell those properties together, you can have a windfall there. But if you're looking at your first home option and you're willing to think about cross lease, that might give you an advantage over other first home buyers or developers that might be scared away by that. Usually, I'm not a huge fan of apartments, given that you don't have the capital gains on the land side of things. But if you are in a situation where budget is limited and you've been frustrated by trying to buy properties and just not getting anywhere, maybe you should consider an apartment, especially now, 2021, apartment prices have kind of flattened out a bit. You can look at apartments with a new set of eyes and start thinking about the lifestyle that comes with them. A lot of them have car parks, pools and gyms, and body corpers are not actually that expensive. And if you want to mitigate the negative of apartments, maybe a good option is a dual key apartment where there's an entrance and then there's 2 lockable doors. So there'll be 2 living areas with separate kitchens and bathrooms, and you can rent half of your dual key apartment out to generate the income and live in the other side. And remember, just because it's your first home doesn't mean you have to live there forever. This property might just be a springboard. Another thing you want to think about when you're buying your first home, if you don't want to compete against developers, is to look at the zoning of your property. So if you're buying something in a single house zone, or it's a flood zone, or the driveway is narrow and long, those kinds of things are going to deter developers or potential developers. And what it means is the price that you're going to have to pay is going to be a lot more reasonable. Okay, there are negative aspects to it, but you've got to be pragmatic. This is your first house. You don't want to overpay, and if you can, you want to get good price and good discounts. So if you can spot the things that are going to scare other people away, especially developers going to be scared away by narrow driveways and flood zones, you can look for those kinds of things, and that you're not going to have to compete against anyone with deep pockets. It takes me to my next point is if you're competing against investors, it's going to be a bit harder, especially because investors can use interest-only lending, which means their borrowing is cheaper than yours. Investors can finance to 100%, which means they don't have the same hurdles that you might, needing that 10-20% deposit. So if you can focus on areas that are relatively low yield for rental properties, then you know that investors who are looking for high yield will be less likely to compete against you in the auction room or through negotiation. So this, for the future, if you're looking to buy and build a property portfolio, it might not be super helpful, but in terms of buying your first property, if it's a low yield area, like it might be a nice area that just doesn't rent for very much, buying that first property might be that much easier because of the low yields. And another really key point is, I would just say, get pre-approval as a first home buyer, and do not be scared to understand what you need to do unconditional pre-auction offers, which I've talked about in other videos. Is if you see a property come on the market, you want to act very quickly, offer a great price if you can, and try and bring that auction forward. Because if the property is only marketed for 2 weeks instead of 4 or 6 or 8 weeks, there's going to be less competition. So if you're targeting less desirable properties that developers won't be interested in, if you're targeting low yield properties that other investors might not be interested in, and you're really committed in terms of being able to go to pre-auction offer, you're going to give yourself other advantages. And another tactic I've seen quite work well for first home buyers is to look at properties that are being recently renovated, because that's going to deter investors that are looking to add value through renovation. It's going to deter developers that are looking to buy that property for future development, because they know they're going to have to pay the higher price because of those renovations, and they don't want that property. They just want to buy it to clear it. To be successful as a first home buyer, you've got to think like an investor, you've got to think like a developer, and you've got to target properties that they're not going to be interested in, and you're going to use tactics that they're not going to be able to use. Pre-auction offers, developers usually want due diligence periods. Investors, if they see something that's going to auction early, they know it's already under contract, they're not going to get a discounted price like they hope for, and they'll just go to the next deal. As a successful first home buyer, you just have to do things that other first home buyers are not going to do, and understand the nuances of other types of buyers, and you should have more success. So if you're going to be looking to buy your first property in the next wee while, do the mortgage snapshot, hit reply to that email, and you should book a call with Jarrett so he can take you through all the different kinds of ways that you can finance the first property, whether it's using gifting or guarantee from mum and dad, whether you've got 10 to 20% deposit. There's a lot of nuances, and you want to make sure you choose the right mortgage, the structure, and the right bank based on your circumstances.